In the 1960s, Bob Crane had everything an actor could want. With his perfect smile and quick jokes, he won over TV watchers as Colonel Robert Hogan, the smart leader in the hit TV show Hogan Churros. When he wasn't on TV, he was just as likable, known for his funny jokes and friendly personality. But while the world saw him as the nice television star, behind the scenes, his life was falling apart in ways most people couldn't imagine. What started as a career built on making people laugh would end in betrayal, scandal, and a terrible death that left more questions than answers. The rise of a star. Before to fame, Bob Crane had already built a name for himself on the radio in Los Angeles. Known as the man of 1,000 voices, he hosted a popular morning show on KANX where he talked to famous people like Marilyn Monroe, Bob Hope, and Charlton H. His quick thinking and natural confidence made him a favorite among Hollywood's biggest stars. Even Walt Disney once called him the fastest joke teller in the West. His success on radio led him into acting. In 1961, famous TV writer Carl Reiner came on Crane's radio show and later gave him a guest spot on the Van GJK show as a cheating husband. That single role opened the door to more chances, including a regular part as a happy-go-lucky dentist on The Donna Reed Show. By 1965, Crane's agent sent him the script for a new television show called Hogan Churros. At first, he thought it was a war drama, not knowing it was a comedy about Allied prisoners of war. Al was outsmarting their silly German words. Even though the idea was weird, Hogan's Heroes became a huge hit. Crane's acting as Colonel Roberthagen made him famous everywhere. The show ran for 6 seasons from 1965 to 1971, earning him 2 Emmy nominations and turning him into one of television's most famous stars. His face appeared on billboards, lunchboxes, and magazines across the country. For millions of viewers, he was the smiling, smart leader who always had a plan. On screen, Crane was living the dream. But even when he was most famous, people close to him began seeing changes. His personal life became hard. His need for excitement grew, and his behavior off camera showed he had an obsession that would slowly eat him up. For now, though, the world only saw the secret double life. Behind the smile and charm that made Bob Crane a household name, there was a very different reality happening. In the mid-1960s, his interest in taking pictures began turning into something more personal. First, he simply enjoyed playing with cameras, taking pictures of people, and trying new video equipment. But slowly, the camera became more than a hobby. It turned into a big part of his private world. The turning point came when his Hogan Churros co-star Richard Dawson told him about John Carpenter, a video equipment salesman for Sony Electronics. Carpenter knew lots of people in Hollywood and gave Crane access to the newest technology. The two quickly became friends, bonding over their shared interest in record injectment. Carpenter even helped him set up devices in hotels while they were on the road. What started as a friendship built on curiosity eventually led to behavior that worried people who knew Crane best. Together they began going to bars and nightclubs where Crane's celebrity status got plenty of attention. Hefton told people Carpenter was his manager, and the pair became best friends, traveling together and spending countless hours playing with new gadgets. While some saw this as harmless fun, others were upset by how much Crane seemed to need his constant filming. Co-workers noticed he was becoming distracted, more worried about his side hobby than with the work that had once defined him. The stress spilled into his personality. His marriage to Tertian, his high school sweetheart, and the mother office, 3 children, ended in divorce after more than 20 years. He later married Patricia Olson, known to viewers of Hogan's Heroes as Secret Valdez, but same problems followed him. Even during the filming of Disney's 1973 family movie Supered, Crane's behavior on set was reported to have raised concerns among bosses, hurting his reputation in the business. By the late 1970s, Crane was no longer the television star he had once been. He found steady work in stage plays and seemed determined to rebuild his career. At the same time, however, his friendship with Carpenter had become a source of trouble. Crane told friends that he wanted to move on, to leave behind old habits and start fresh, but by the summer of 1978, it was already too late. The murder in Scottsdale. By June 1978, Bob Crane was living in Scottsdale, Arizona, performing in a stage comedy called Beginner's Luck at Windmill. At 49 years old, just 2 weeks away from his 50th birthday, he seemed determined to change his life. Friends later remembered that he had talked about divorcing Patricia Olson and ending his friendship with John Carpenter. He wanted to wipe the slate clean, but before he could take that step, his life came to a sudden and sad end. On the afternoon of June 29th, co-star Victoria Ann Barry went to check on Crane after he died and show up for a lunch meeting. Inside his apartment at Winfield Place, she found a scene that would haunt Hollywood for years. Crane was found dead in his bed. The injuries to his head were bad, and police believe the object used may have been a camera tripod. An electrical cord was also found near him, though it didn't cause his death. What bothered detectives most was how little there was in the room. Nothing had been stolen, and there were no signs someone broke in. Whoever was responsible was someone Crane trusted enough to let inside, or maybe Somianuho came in while he slept. That narrow circle of suspects quickly pointed toward John Carpenter. He had flown into Phoenix just days earlier to spend time with Crane. The two had dinner the night before, and according to reports, Evan watched some of their private recordings together. Carpenter said he went back to his own motel afterward, but witnesses later said Histamelon was wrong. The crime scene also showed a hidden side of Crane's personal life. Police found cameras, tripods, tapes, and cables throughout the apartment, filled with recordings that shocked the public. The beloved star of Hogan shows was suddenly shown in headlines as a man fighting private battles. For his family, the discovery was heartbreaking. For police, it became both a clue and a distraction. The equipment tied Crane's private world directly to Carpenter, but the shocking nature of the evidence made the search for truth harder. What was clear from the very beginning, however, was that this was no random break-in. It was personal. The investigation and trial. The Scottsdale Police Department was not ready to handle a major case in 1978. They had no special murder division, and mistakes at the crime scene will trouble police for years. Detectives collected tapes, photographs, and recording equipment from Crane's apartment, but the handling of evidence was sloppy. Friends and even family members, including Crane's oldest son, Robert, were allowed to enter the apartment before it was properly secured, leaving behind fingerprints, hair, and footprints that made death scene even more confusing. Despite these problems, suspicion soon centered on John Carpenter. He had been staying nearby, had spent time with Crane the night before, and his rental car had smears of blood that matched Crane's type. At the time, DNA testing wasn't yet available, and blood typing alone was not enough to prove guilt. Without a clear weapon or fingerprints, the Maricopa County District Attorney decided not to file charges. Carpenter went back to Los Angeles, but his reputation was permanently damaged. For more than 10 years, the case went quiet. Then in 1990, investigators Barry Vassell and Jim Raines reopened the files. New advances in DNA testing gave them hope. They looked at the evidence again and found an old photograph of Carpenter's car interior that seemed to show a biological piece. The original samples had been lost, but that discovery was enough for prosecutors to move forward. In 1992, John Carpenter was arrested and formally charged in connection with Crane's death. The trial, which began in 1994, played out like a courtroom drama. The prosecution argued that Carpenter, upset over Crane's decision to end their friendship, had acted out of anger. They showed the blood evidence, the history between the two men, and testimony from Crane's son, Scotty, who said his father had repeatedly talked about cutting Carpenter out of his life. The defense responded by questioning how reliable the evidence was. They pointed out that the key biological sample was missing, that the crime scene had been poorly preserved, and that tetrapod theory was just guessing. They also pointed to the possibility of other suspects, such as people who may have held grudges against Crane. After weeks of testimony, the jury was not convinced. In 1994, John Carpenter was found not guilty. He said he was innocent until his death in 1998. Officially, the case went back to the cold files, still unsolved and unfinished. The family's struggle and the legacy of scandal for Bob Crane's children. The trial brought no peace. His oldest son, Robert, described how painful it was to watch the most personal details of his father's life turned into a public show. The courtroom was filled with testimony and evidence that moved attention away from Crane's decades of work in radio and television. Instead of bringing answers, the trial left his family with more questions and a lasting feeling of hurt. Robert David Crane, another of his sons, later talked about his suspicion that Patricia Olson, Crane's second wife, known on screen as Secret Valdez, may have had a deeper connection to what had happened. He noted that Bob's will left this entire estate to Olsen, leaving out his children and first wife. Nobody got anything out of this except for one person, Robert David said. Prosecutor Sneaver thought Olsen was a suspect, but guessing added another layer of bitterness to the family's sadness. Crane's son, Scotty, also struggled with how his father was shown. He said that those who appeared in recordings were willing participants, but media coverage rarely showed the full story. Headlines painted Crane as a fallen star eaten up by controversy, overshadowing his reputation as a groundbreaking radio host and Emmy-nominated actor. What he accomplished on stage and screen was drowned out by the darker parts of history. The funeral in July 1978 had shown just how loved Crane was in Hollywood. Around 200 mourners, including stars like Patty Duke, Carol O'Connor, and John Astin, came to St. Paul the Apostle Church in Los Angeles to pay their respects. His co-stars Flanagan's heroes served as pallbearers. Yet, in the years that followed, Hollywood seemed to quietly step away. Reruns of Hogan's Heroes went down, and Crane's name was often whispered with controversy rather than celebrated fraudulent. For his family, this was the most painful cut of all. The man they knew was complicated, flawed, yes, but also warm, funny, and gifted. Instead of being remembered for the joy he brought to millions, he was frozen in time as the subject of an unsolved case. His achievements buried beneath a cloud that never fully lifted. New DNA tests, Hollywood's memory, and the final tragedy. Even after John Carpenter's not guilty verdict in 1994, the Scottsdale Police Maricopa County prosecutor scontioned to look at Bob Crane's case. Technology was getting better and there was hope that DNA could succeed where 1970's crime-solving methods had failed. In 2016, Phoenix television reporter John Hook got permission to retest their remaining blood samples taken from Carpenter's rental car. Using modern techniques, scientists found two male DNA sequences. One belonged to a unknown man, while the other was too damaged to give a conclusion. Importantly, the tests used up all of their remaining material, making any further analysis impossible. The case once again returned to limbo. This result frustrated Crane's surviving family. His son, Robert, who published Crane, Sex, Celebrity, and My Father's Unsolved Murder in 2015, admitted that closure would never come. He described living with his father's death as living in a constant fog. Scotty, meanwhile, pushed back against portrayals of his father in popular culture. When the 2002 film Autofocus showed Crane in an exaggerated and sensational way, Scotty argued that it was wrong. He even created a website, BobCrane.com, to share documents and material that he felt showed a fuller, more balanced picture of his father's life. Yet, that image to Crane's reputation remained. Hollywood rarely mentions his name without a reminder of controversy. His greatest achievement, Hogan's Heroes, is almost always discussed in same breath as his unsolved case. What was once a groundbreaking sitcom is now overshadowed by the mystery surrounding its star. For the public, Crane is not remembered primarily as the gifted improviser or the likable colonel, but as the man forever linked to an unfinished story. The tragedy isn't only in how he died, but in how he's remembered. Bob Crane spent decades making people laugh, bringing humor to even the most unlikely settings and earning admiration across the country. Yet, because of one night in Scottsdale and the revelations that followed, his center legacy was rewritten. His case remains unsolved, his memory unsettled, and the final chapter of his life defined not by triumph, but by betrayal and sadness. Bob Crane's story is one of Hollywood's dark tragedies. A man who made millions laugh on screen was ultimately done by secrets he couldn't escape and a crime that was never solved. Decades later, his family still searches for answers, but the truth may be gone forever. What do you think really happened in Scottsdale that night in 1978? Share your thoughts in the comments below and don't forget to like and subscribe for more untold Hollywood stories.